Hi everybody, thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Alda Leu Dennis. I'm a general partner at Initialized Capital. I started the Fortitude show because I wanted to show other founders out there how difficult it is to go through the journey and showcase some companies that have overcome hardships to become successful companies and persevere in what they're building. Joining us today is Shadiah Sigala. She is the CEO and co-founder of Kinside. Kinside matches families with childcare services and daycares and preschools and provides that as an employee benefit. Shadiah is joining us to talk a little bit about what inspired her to start Kinside, which is a company that helps match families with childcare providers.
Yeah, well, they say that necessity is the mother of all invention, and that's exactly how so many of us tech startup founders start. I was co-founding a company called Honeybook, and this company is on the fast track. We're growing. We have all of the growing pains, including the fact that a lot of us former 20-something-year-olds were getting later into life and starting families. When I became pregnant with my first child, I now have two, the process of actually returning to work was incredibly difficult. Why? First of all, because giving birth is incredibly difficult, but also because I couldn't find childcare for the life of me, right? I actually had to delay my return to work, right? Even as a co-founder, I'm like, oh no, I got to get back in the swing of things. And literally 1 week before I'm, due to return back to work, I'm still calling 10 daycares, marking them in a spreadsheet, ultimately landed on care.com, hired the first nanny that was available. Thank God she ended up being great, right? And that was the beginning of that story. And so I realized that my story was going to become replicated through the company as more and more employees had kids.
As a mother of three, I can definitely relate to the lack of high quality, affordable childcare and the necessity for having that to make all of our lives more productive in other realms. Can you talk a little bit about your journey with Kinside? We met when you were coming out of YC and invested just out of YC, and where you've gone since then. I know COVID was a difficult time for all of us, but especially on the childcare front, and really emphasized for me and my family the importance of childcare, because I think a lot of us know now that it's very, very difficult to both work and watch kids and have them be getting schooling on Zoom and to do all of that effectively and productively without great childcare.
So I think that the story of Kinside is so indicative of what's happening in the venture capital space today, which is, I think, a very, very positive direction. So starting with Y Combinator. Right, YC was just as intense as they make it seem, and imagine going through Y Combinator, a world famous accelerator. So you're accelerating a company, and also imagine having going through it with a 4-month newborn who is still breastfeeding and a 2-year-old toddler, a 2.5-year-old toddler on the side as well. And so I remember right before the batch started, I emailed the Y Combinator person. And I said, do you guys have a mother's room? And they did not. And they said, well, we have the bathroom. And I was like, And they said, hold please. They could sense the tone coming. And they said, hold please. And they came back and they dutifully responded the very next day, hey, we've actually set aside one of the partners' conference rooms to be your designated mother's room. There are so many ways that female founders, parent founders and mother founders are changing the way that we build startups.
Well, I think that's a great example of how you paved the path for female founders, and I think you're doing the same by helping, other workers find ways that they can be more productive, and even participating in this show and sharing your story about what your toughest week has been. And I think it's interesting, having worked with you for the last 3 years almost. Your toughest week wasn't, when COVID hit and people started pulling their kids out of school and daycares and preschools shut down. Talk a little bit about what your toughest period of time has been.
That was not a tough week.
It was.
And really, it was not a tough 3 months and 4 months that my
or
kids...
2 years, yeah.
Or 2 years, and actually for 3 or 4 months, my kids were at home with me while I was working as a solo parent. To be totally honest, my toughest week as a founder is when I'm living right now. And maybe the week is more of a month, but I'm actually right in the middle of a really intense family situation where my responsibility as a mother has come to the forefront, and my duties as a co-founder have really had to be relegated to secondary. And that is because sometimes you just have to contend with the true priorities in your life when you have no choice, right? When your family's well-being is at stake, that is the only thing that you care about. That is the only thing that you can think about. So in the last, let's call it a week, let's call it a month, my co-founders and my management team and the entire company that is about 18 to 20 people at Kinside currently have really, really risen to the occasion. And they really didn't rise to the occasion. They've been risen, right? That's one thing that I really realized is I had very frank conversations with my co-founders and the management team and said, hey, I'm going through something incredibly difficult. I'm going to be very, very distracted. In fact, I have to drop off the map for at least a week. Like, I got hit by a bus. Just think about it that way. And the response was immediate, of course, intense and incredible empathy. And also, no sweat, we got it. Like this, no sweat. And I really, really believed when they looked me in the face and said, we got it. And I was like, I believe that. And then I said, peace out. And then, I went to take care of my business.
Well, and not to mention, over the last few weeks, we've been fundraising for your Series A as well. And, having a sideline seat to it, I wasn't fully apprised of what was going on, but I definitely noticed that your normally very enthusiastically and super communicative cadence was a little bit slower. It seemed like you were still able to manage your own personal crisis as well as the fundraise.
I think one of the biggest misperceptions that really hurt, I'm going to say founders, people, women, mothers, parents, is that you have to continuously be 100% plugged in all the time. And we all know as parents, like anyone who's a parent, whether you're a founder or an employee or just a person in life, you know that your job doesn't always have your full attention. And so I feel like I've already been in training, if you will, for this moment, which is, hey, sometimes family is just gonna take more attention than work. And in this particular case, it's taking a lot more attention. But despite that, I would actually say maybe because of that, because I was able to actually flow through the process in a little bit of a slower pace, in fact, we found the right and perfect investor who met us.
I'm happy to say that you recently signed a term sheet for the Series A. Congratulations. We're very excited about the road ahead. And I think I'm particularly excited because I do think that as we're now sort of trying to navigate a post-COVID world, being able to figure out those crucial pieces on the childcare front are going to be increasingly important to families as well as their employers. So congratulations on that and doing it during this toughest period of time for your company. And also one of the lessons I feel like you've touched upon is the importance of having a team around you that can really step up and take over for you in certain functions. And maybe you could talk a little bit about how you think about hiring and roles and responsibilities for you and your co-founders and your executive team.
Yeah, so one of the biggest lessons coming out of this that I will extol forever is the importance of having the right team, culture, and system in place so that responsibility is both distributed and almost redundated, right? So in this case, to your point, I mean, it was really humbling to understand and realize that your role as a CEO is actually very specific and not that broad, paradoxically speaking. Operationally, we have the right leaders and the right co-founders and leaders in place from the beginning. We have a very flat organization. I'm not that involved in the day-to-day operations, and thank goodness. The only two things that I realized I was absolutely essential in were, you mentioned one, fundraising. Yeah, that's actually one of the indelible roles that a CEO will likely always have. So, okay, I checked that box, cool. And the second one was payroll. And that one I failed because we didn't have another payroll admin in Gusto. And for like a day or two, we couldn't run a payroll thing. And that's pretty bad. And I realized, okay, that's one area also that the CEO usually in the early stages is running operationally. But then guess what I did? I appointed somebody else a Gusto admin as well. So this wouldn't happen again.
Well, I think you're selling yourself short. I think, the key role that you've already done up until this point is putting executives and processes into place where you can render yourself redundant. And, thank you for proactively doing that. I think a lot of our portfolio companies tend to think about that post A because they have more capital, they're able to hire more senior, more experienced team members. But I've seen the way you've mentored and trained your current team to get to the point where you can, deal with crises and not feel like the company has lost a step.
And it's not just about the crises moments, right? It's just like the full humanity and the full robustness of who we are as people. And so just, it's natural that it's in our ethos in our company that we're very pro-family, right? Like that's what we do in the world. We're trying to create a more pro-family workplace. So of course, internally, we have to mirror those same values.
I love you mentioned to me before sort of thinking flexibly about how to navigate this new environment, and especially as a solo parent, which I think is obviously even more difficult and makes childcare that much more important. How you've been adjusting to last minute childcare emergencies and sort of share some of your tips or stories around that.
Yeah, so it helps that a lot of our company are also parents. So we have a lot of empathy and a lot of built-in margin for each other. And I literally couldn't think of a more specific and relevant example than just last week. My co-founder Brittany and I had a meeting that we were so looking forward to with a fellow CEO of a fellow really, really great childcare startup. 1 hour before the meeting is about to commence, and some part of San Francisco, I get a call from the daycare saying your son is sick and you need to come pick him up right now, right? And in those moments, you're like, you just have to make, you just make a calculus. And I thought, you know what? I'm not missing this meeting, and I have to be there for my son. And I called Lynn, the CEO, and I said, Lynn, we're moving the venue. You're coming to my house. My son is sick. Just so you know, I'm going to be in and out. I'm going to be tending to him, and it's going to be all good. And yep, and sure enough, and that also for me goes to speak to the higher sort of consciousness I think that we're reaching as businesses and business leaders all around. That when you do business with other companies that are also in the same values as you, you're probably just going to flow a lot more easily.
I mean, I've actually seen that transformation happen across the board. And I think COVID has been helpful to that. I mean, just this morning I had a board meeting where the co-investor who was on the board, his son was sitting in the background in his office, sort of just like hanging out while the board meeting was going on like this. And it was totally fine, right? Like no one even mentioned it. And I just want to close with, your thoughts on if you could look back to, 3.5 years ago when you were thinking about starting the company, if you would have given yourself any advice on how to approach things, and for other founders that are watching, just some tips on how to get, through really, turbulent times and come out with great outcomes.
One thing that I was really scared about as I was starting a family was, oh my gosh, is this the end of my career? Maybe not the end of my career, but is this the beginning of a plateau of a career? This is 6 years ago before I had my child. And then I have my second baby and I'm like, oh my God. And now I'm doing another startup. Like, is this, can you really have both things? And for better or worse, if there is a silver lining, and there's probably a few, for better or worse, what this pandemic has brought forward is just this normalization that human beings do have families, that mothers do exist. We do have ambitions, and we can absolutely have incredible careers, have a family. It's gonna look messy in between. I'm not saying like you can have it all and it's amazing. But yeah, I think that there's just a lot more space that people are willing to make for each other to allow for those parts of life that bring in the fullness of who we are in relation to our families and communities.
Thank you so much to Shadiah Sigala, co-founder and CEO of Kinside, for joining us today. And thank you for joining us at home. Hope to see you again on future episodes.